I walked through my own front door without making a sound, and the shoes stopped me cold. His Oxfords, the burgundy ones I'd given him for our 6th anniversary, sitting sideways at the base of the stairs like he'd kicked them off mid-stride. Next to them, a pair of heeled sandals I recognized immediately. I'd watched my best friend buckle those same sandals outside a restaurant 3 weeks ago. I stood in my own foyer for a long moment, listening to the sounds filtering down from the 2nd floor. Her laughter. Low, easy, familiar in a way that made my stomach turn to stone. I didn't call out. I didn't climb the stairs. I set my carry-on bag down against the wall, as quietly as a held breath, and I walked to my home office. Because the ending of this story was never going to belong to them. My flight from Denver had landed 2 hours early. The client presentation I'd flown out for had been canceled the night before, a merger falling through at the last minute, and I'd rebooked the first seat home without telling anyone. I remember thinking how much my husband would love the surprise. I'd even texted my best friend from the gate, telling her I'd be back by noon instead of Thursday. She'd sent back a string of heart emojis and said she couldn't wait to see me. She was seeing quite a lot of me right now, just not in the way I'd imagined. I closed my office door without latching it and sat down at my desk. My laptop opened to the same corporate audit dashboard I used every day at work, and I spent exactly 4 minutes sitting completely still, breathing steadily, before I started doing what I do best. I audit. My name is Lauren Hargrove. I'm a senior forensic auditor at a financial consulting firm in Seattle, which means I spend my professional life finding the things people believe they've hidden. Fraudulent expense reports, falsified invoices, money that moves in directions it was never supposed to move. I am very good at finding things people don't want found. My husband knew this about me. My best friend knew this about me. Apparently neither of them thought it applied to them. I pulled up my husband's shared calendar first, the one we'd set up 4 years ago so we could coordinate our travel schedules. He ran a mid-size landscaping and outdoor design company, successful enough that he had a small staff and a handful of corporate clients. His calendar showed client consultations on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons for the past 11 weeks. I cross-referenced against his company's project management software, which I had legitimate access to as a co-signer on the business account. Those Tuesday and Thursday consultations didn't correspond to any active projects or build hours. They were ghost appointments, placeholders, the kind of thing someone creates when they need a reason to be somewhere they shouldn't be. The credit card statements loaded next. I'd never had a reason to scrutinize them before. We maintained joint finances, trusted each other completely, or so I believed. The charges were not subtle once I knew what I was looking at. A boutique hotel in Capitol Hill, 12 times in the past 3 months, a wine bar 2 blocks from our house always on a weeknight always for 2. A jewelry store charge in April that I never received anything from. Flowers billed to a delivery address on the east side of the city. That address was my best friend's apartment. She and I had been close since college. We'd been in each other's weddings, though hers had ended in divorce 4 years ago. I'd helped her get back on her feet after that, introduced her to my professional contacts, even referred her to my firm's HR team when she was looking for contract work. She'd built a secondary income through a wellness and lifestyle brand she ran online, and I'd helped her draft the contract language for her first major sponsorship deal. I had helped build the life she was now using to destroy mine. The sound of running water started overhead. My shower. I put in my earbuds, not music, just noise cancellation, and I kept working. My best friend's sponsorship contracts were a matter of public record through the brand disclosure agreements she posted on her website. I'd helped her negotiate every clause. I knew exactly what her primary wellness sponsor required of her in terms of personal conduct. The morale language was ironclad. It covered any behavior that could be characterized as damaging to the brand's family-forward image, including conduct that a reasonable consumer would find objectionable. An affair with a married man, specifically her best friend's husband, would qualify so thoroughly it would end the conversation before it began. Her secondary sponsors were smaller, but the contract language was similar. 3 of them used the same standard template her talent agent had drafted. I'd reviewed that template myself. I'd even suggested a tighter definition of the reputation clause. I had been very thorough at the time. I photographed the sandals in the foyer with my phone before doing anything else. Time-stamped, geotagged, saved to cloud backup in 3 separate locations. I was a forensic auditor. I understood chain of custody. The water stopped running. I heard voices. Then the soft percussion of my bedroom closet opening and closing. I made myself a cup of coffee in the kitchen, completely calm, and carried it back to my desk. I had been with my husband for 9 years, married for 6. We had built a life together with the kind of incremental, deliberate effort that neither of us came from. I had paid down his business debt when we married. He had moved to Seattle from Portland for me, leaving behind his entire social world. We had been a team in a way I had believed was unshakable. The private messages between them were harder to access but not impossible. My husband's email was linked to our family cloud account, a setup he'd asked me to configure 2 years ago when he'd switched phones and lost his contacts. He had the password saved to my keychain. I had never thought to check it before, because I had never needed to. Now I opened his inbox and typed my best friend's name into the search bar. There were 412 results. I did not read all of them. I read enough. The first message was from 7 months ago. The most recent was from yesterday, while I was in Denver presenting to a client. The tone shifted over those 7 months from tentative to comfortable to something that looked, reading it in the flat light of my office, like people who believed they had already decided how this ended. There was a message thread where they discussed what would happen to our house. My house. The one I'd bought before we were married, the one I'd carried the primary mortgage on for 11 years. They had opinions about my house. They had plans. I saved the entire thread to a separate drive. By this point, I had been home for 45 minutes. They were still upstairs. I could hear the floorboards moving. I opened a new document and began drafting. Not a confrontation speech, a timeline. 11 weeks of hotel visits with dates and charges. 7 months of documented electronic communication. The cross-referenced calendar discrepancies. The financial exposure. The contractual vulnerabilities. I was building a case the same way I built every case, methodically, without emotion, because emotion was the luxury of people who plan to lose. Then I made tea instead of finishing my coffee because I was going to be here for a while and I wanted to be awake. Footsteps on the stairs. 2 sets. I heard my husband's voice before he reached the hallway, casual, mid-sentence, saying something about dinner reservations. And then she answered him, in a voice I had heard 1,000 times, at every birthday and holiday and difficult moment in my adult life, the voice of the person I had trusted more than almost anyone. They came around the corner into the kitchen and stopped. My husband said my name like it was a question. I looked up from my laptop and smiled. Not a warm smile. The kind of smile I use when a client's accounting team has just finished presenting numbers they believe are airtight, right before I show them the 17 discrepancies I found in the first hour. You're home early, he said. Flight change, I said. I looked at my best friend. She was wearing a shirt I'd seen hanging in my closet, one of mine that I'd thought I'd misplaced last month. She was holding her heeled sandals in one hand, which meant she'd gone back for them. I noted that detail without changing my expression. I texted you, I said to her. I know. Her voice had gone very quiet. I was going to leave before you saw me. I know you were. My husband moved toward me. Lauren. Listen, I'd actually like you both to sit down. I gestured toward the kitchen island. I've been working for the past hour and I want to show you something. They didn't sit. They stood in the kitchen doorway the way people stand when they're calculating whether the conversation can still be controlled. It could not. That window had closed 45 minutes ago. I've documented 11 weeks of hotel charges, I said, turning my laptop to face them. $47,000 in fraudulent client consultation hours that don't correspond to any active accounts in your project management system. I looked at my husband. That's a liability issue for the business. Not just for you personally. For the LLC. His face had gone the color of new concrete. I turned to my best friend. And your wellness sponsorship with Clarendon Health, the one I helped you negotiate last spring, has a conduct clause that specifically covers behavior that a reasonable person would consider contrary to family-forward values. I imagine cheating with your best friend's husband qualifies. I also imagine the other 3 contracts you signed using that same template language qualify. She sat down then. Her legs seemed to require it. You're going to destroy my business, she said. It wasn't a question. You already destroyed it, I said. Last month. Or 7 months ago, depending on when you'd like to start the timeline. I closed my laptop. I'm just doing the documentation. My husband found his voice. We can talk about this. There are things you don't understand about what happened between us, about what's been missing. What's been missing, I said, is your honesty. The rest I can account for. I stood up from my stool. You have 48 hours to remove your belongings. The house is in my name. The mortgage has always been in my name. You've known that. Your business account has a cosigner provision that I'll be removing tomorrow morning. I picked up my phone. I've already spoken with my attorney. She's handling the filing. This was not entirely true. I hadn't spoken to my attorney yet. I was calling her the moment they left. But confidence in these moments is its own form of leverage. And I had spent my career understanding leverage. Please, my best friend said. She said my name. She said she was sorry. She said she hadn't meant for it to happen. That it started as nothing. That she had tried to stop it. She was still talking when I walked to my front door and opened it. I'm going to go see a client, I said, which was also not entirely true. I was going to sit in my car and make 3 very specific phone calls. Please be gone before I get back. I closed the door behind me without slamming it. The quiet click was more satisfying than any sound I could have made. My first call went to my attorney, who had been my attorney since before I was married and who did not seem even slightly surprised by what I told her. She had the initial filing prepared within the hour and sent me a PDF before I'd finished my second cup of coffee in the parking lot of a bakery 6 blocks from my house. My second call went to the head of partnerships at Clarendon Health, the wellness brand that represented 70% of my best friend's sponsorship income. We had spoken twice before at industry events. She answered on the first ring. I explained the situation in the same tone I used for audit findings, factual, documented, without editorializing. The silence on her end lasted long enough for me to drink half my coffee. Then she thanked me, told me they'd be scheduling an emergency review, and said she appreciated the professional courtesy of the heads-up before it went public. I told her I'd send documentation. I sent it before she'd even hung up. My third call went to the director of vendor management at my own firm, because my best friend had active contract work with us and I was the one who'd referred her. I reported the conflict of interest. I provided documentation. I made clear that the referral had been made in good faith and that I was disclosing the complication the moment I became aware of it. The director thanked me for my integrity. The irony of that word, landing in that particular moment, was not lost on me. I want to be careful here about something, because I know what it sounds like from the outside. I know some people will read what I did next and call it excessive. I want to tell those people that I understand where that reaction comes from, and that they're welcome to have it. But the messages I read that afternoon between my husband and my best friend were not the messages of 2 people who had made a single terrible mistake and were tormented by guilt. They were the messages of 2 people who had been making plans. Plans that included the house I owned, the financial stability I'd built, the social world I'd cultivated. They had talked about my schedule and used it against me. They had timed their meetings around my travel calendar. They had treated my professional life as a convenience that created space for their arrangement, while simultaneously planning how to dismantle my personal life once they decided the time was right. I didn't destroy 2 people on impulse. I documented the truth, and I let the professional consequences follow naturally. That's a distinction I can live with. By the time I returned home that evening, both of them were gone. My husband had taken a bag of clothes and left his keys on the kitchen counter. The rest, which was most of what filled our shared life, remained exactly where it was. The house was mine and I was not moving out of it. I went upstairs and stripped the bed and put every piece of linen into the trash. Then I remade the bed with sheets I'd had in storage since before we married. Then I took a long shower in my own bathroom and I stood under the hot water until the shaking in my hands stopped. I hadn't cried yet. I wasn't sure when I would. I knew it was coming. Grief doesn't wait for permission. It arrives on its own schedule regardless of how composed you manage to look in the preceding hours. But that night, what I felt most was a silence in the house that was strange and very clean, the way air smells after a storm has moved through. The financial consequences began arriving quickly because financial consequences always do. My husband's business relied on a line of credit secured against our joint account. Once I removed my name as cosigner, the credit line underwent review. Several of his active corporate contracts contained clauses requiring the business to maintain financial standing certifications. 2 of those clients sent notices of concern within 10 days. One of them, a property management group that had been his largest account, paused the contract entirely pending review of his company's financial status. He called me 4 times in the first week. I let each call go to voicemail. His messages evolved from defensive to apologetic to something that sounded like genuine panic as the scope of the professional consequences became clear. In the 4th message, he said he needed to talk about the business. He said I was overreacting. He said we had both made mistakes in this marriage. I saved that message to the same file where I'd been keeping the hotel receipts. My best friend's situation moved faster because the sponsorship world moves quickly when brand reputation is at stake. Clarendon Health terminated her contract within 5 days and issued a quiet statement about parting with brand ambassadors whose conduct fell outside their values framework. The other 3 sponsors followed within 2 weeks. A fitness equipment brand she'd been in talks with for a new partnership went silent immediately. Her follower count began dropping within 24 hours of the Clarendon news circulating through wellness industry circles. Not catastrophically at first, but steadily, the slow bleed that happens when an audience senses something has changed even before they know exactly what. By the end of the first month, she had lost nearly 40% of her engagement metrics, which was the number that actually mattered to sponsors more than the raw count. She texted me once, on a Tuesday evening, 3 weeks after everything happened. She said she knew I was angry and she deserved it. She said she missed me and that was the truest thing she could say. She said she hoped someday I would understand that she hadn't planned for it to become what it became, that she had tried to stay away from him, that she had failed at something she should never have let herself attempt. I read the message twice. I thought about the 9 years we had known each other. The way she'd called me the night her marriage ended and I'd driven across the city at 2 in the morning because she shouldn't be alone. The way I'd sat next to her at her mother's funeral and held her hand through the entire service. The way I had, with complete and total trust, handed her the contract language she'd used to build her income while she was using that same income to fund the apartment she'd made into a second home for my husband. I didn't respond. I blocked the number. She had a daughter, 13 years old, who had her own small presence on her mother's social channels. I thought about that girl often in the weeks that followed. She hadn't chosen any of this. She was paying for it anyway in the way children always pay for their parents' decisions, in social currency and quiet embarrassment, and the particular loneliness of having something wrong at home that can't be explained to friends. I thought about sending her something, a note, something small, to let her know that none of it was her fault. I didn't know how to do that without making things worse. I hope she turned out fine. I believe she did, mostly because kids are more resilient than adults give them credit for, and also because I needed to believe it. My husband's company survived, though not in the form it had taken before. He let go of 2 employees. He lost the property management contract permanently. He restructured as a sole proprietor, which in practical terms meant he was starting over from a smaller foundation with less leverage and less credit than he'd had when we met. I know this not because I was tracking him but because Seattle's business community is not enormous and information travels through it in particular ways. Several colleagues mentioned updates over the months that followed, always with the careful neutral tone of people who aren't sure whether you want to hear it. I wanted to hear it. I won't pretend otherwise. There is something true and human and not entirely flattering in the satisfaction of watching the natural consequences of someone's choices arrive on schedule. 6 months after the divorce was filed, I went to visit my college roommate in Chicago. She had been the first person I'd called that day, before the attorney, before the sponsorship director, before anyone else. She had said, without hesitating, "Tell me what you need." That had been the most useful thing anyone said to me that entire year. I was in Chicago for a weekend and on the second morning I sat on her apartment balcony with coffee and Lake Michigan in the distance and I thought about something I hadn't had time to think about in the middle of everything that had happened. I thought about the version of myself that had been in that marriage. Not a bad version. Not a woman who deserved what had happened. But a woman who had been so competent, so reliably capable of managing every difficult thing, that she had sometimes managed the difficult thing of her own loneliness by filing it away and returning to work. A woman who had heard her husband say on 3 separate occasions in the last 2 years that he felt like she didn't need him, and had taken that as a communication problem to solve rather than an ache that needed attending to. I was not responsible for his choice. I want to be very clear about that. People who feel disconnected from their partners do not have to betray them. They can speak, or leave, or ask for help. What he did was not my fault. But the work of rebuilding my life included understanding myself clearly, including the places where I had been so focused on being competent that I had forgotten to be present. And that understanding belonged to me, not to him, not as an excuse for what he'd done but as something I wanted to carry forward honestly. The divorce finalized 8 months after I filed. I had handled most of it myself, the financial disclosures, the asset separation, the paperwork, because I was a forensic auditor and this was, at its core, an accounting exercise. My attorney reviewed everything and confirmed I'd left nothing on the table. The house stayed mine. The investment accounts I'd held before the marriage stayed mine. The joint account was dissolved and split according to contribution, which meant most of it was mine. My husband retained his business and his personal debt, which was substantial. I refinanced the mortgage in my name alone and used part of the settlement to renovate the master bedroom. New floors, new windows, new light. I wanted the room to look like mine, which meant I wanted it to look different from anything it had been while I was sharing it with someone who was treating it as a stopover. I got a promotion at work 7 months after everything happened. My firm elevated me to a senior director position overseeing a new forensic audit division. The timing was coincidental. The promotion was not. I had been building toward that position for 3 years and the work didn't stop being good because my personal life had collapsed around it. If anything, I had found the work more essential during that period. The precision of it. The way every answer is findable if you're willing to be methodical and patient. There is comfort in that, when other things feel only like chaos. I signed up for a hiking trip to the Olympic Peninsula with a group I'd joined the previous spring, 7 strangers and a guide, 4 days on trails I'd never walked. I don't know exactly what I expected from it. What I found was that I was good at it in ways I hadn't known about myself, the endurance part of it, the part where you keep moving through discomfort because the view at the end of the climb is genuinely worth the climb. I came home with sore legs and 12 photographs of water and forest and the particular quality of Pacific Northwest light at 6 in the morning, and something in me that had been contracted and braced since that Tuesday in my foyer had loosened enough to breathe. I started dating again 11 months after the divorce was filed. Not casually and not desperately. I went on 6 first dates before I went on a second one with anyone, because I had become much less patient with people who said one thing while meaning another, and I had also become much better at identifying which people those were. The man I eventually began seeing was a structural engineer who had been divorced 3 years earlier for reasons he explained clearly and without casting himself as the wronged party, which I found more attractive than I would have predicted. A year after everything happened, I received a voicemail from my best friend. She had called once more, from a different number, and this time she did not ask for anything. She said she was living in Portland now. She said she'd rebuilt some of her work and was doing okay, which I believed, because she had always been resilient in her own way. She said her daughter was doing well. She said that she had thought, every single day for a year, about what she had done to our friendship and that she didn't expect forgiveness and wasn't asking for it, but that she wanted me to know she was sorry in a way that was permanent, not contingent on anything, not trying to get anything back. I listened to the message twice. I didn't call back. But I also didn't delete it immediately. I let it sit in my voicemail for 2 weeks, which is its own kind of answer, maybe. There is a trail near my house that runs along the ridge above the city. I go there on Sunday mornings now with a thermos of coffee and sometimes a book I don't end up opening because the view keeps pulling my attention outward. Seattle in the morning light is the kind of beautiful that surprises you no matter how many times you've seen it, the water and the mountains and the way the sky moves through colors it barely pauses at before changing again. I go there alone, mostly. Sometimes with the engineer, who is good company on a trail and does not fill silence with noise just because the silence is present. Standing there one morning this past fall, I thought about what I would say if someone asked me what I'd learned from the worst year of my professional and personal life at the same time. I thought about it for a long time, long enough that my coffee went cool. Here is what I came up with. The people who betray you will always underestimate you, because to do what they're doing they have to. They have to believe that you won't look closely, won't ask the right questions, won't know what the receipts mean. They build their deception on an image of you that makes their betrayal feel manageable to them. The version of me they were betraying was softer, less observant, easier to handle than the actual version. I was grateful for that miscalculation. Not because it gave me the ability to cause damage, though it did, but because it confirmed something I have believed for a long time. The most powerful thing you can be is exactly who you are. Specifically, and without apology. Because people who are counting on you to be someone else will be wrong about you in all the ways that matter. The city glittered below me that morning, the same city that had held my whole life for 15 years, the same city where I had been betrayed and had chosen to stay and had, in staying, slowly and deliberately built something better than what I had lost. I finished the cold coffee. I walked home. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and let me know in the comments what moment hit hardest. And if you want more stories about women who refuse to be underestimated, subscribe. It's free, and I promise the stories are always worth your time.